The world is watching with their ears.
Hey Paratopia, it's Jeff Ritzmann here, flying solo with you on yet another Friday night. I am without the Jeremy Vaeni, all alone on a mic for the first time since the second eclipse, and I have to tell you, it's a pain in the ass. I've tried no more than 20 times to start this program, to trip myself up on every occasion. And originally tonight, I set out to talk about the notion of the government cover-up of ufology, which we don't talk about a whole lot on this show. And I don't know, I recorded about an hour and 15 minutes, and then I said, you know what? No, not enough. I think it goes without saying that we have not kind of followed the mainstream on this show when it comes to ufology. And one of the things that we've barely even touched upon has been the cover-up of all of this. And I've been kind of surfing around lately and going to abovetopsecret.com again. I've kind of, started poking my head in the door here and there. And I noticed that I'm kind of treating it like a barometer. I mean, let's make no bones about it. Largest discussion board of its kind on the internet, probably the most popular. And so you can assume that a lot of people who are just getting into this or just becoming interested or get piqued by a TV show or a radio show are going to find that in a search on the net. And they're going to go there and they're going to get involved in talking about it. So I think it's a decent barometer for saying, here's what people are interested in talking about, and here's what they think about this stuff. And you get a cross-section of everything because it's a wide-open door policy there. You get everything from the frauds and the, mush-minded morons to thoughtful, intelligent, great people with something to say. So I look on there the other day and I see a lot of talk about disclosure, the cover-up, the Bassetts, the Greers, the so on and so forth. I mean, we've gone ad nauseum over this stuff. And you start thinking about exopolitics, and I know Jeremy has talked about exopolitics, and he's written articles for UFO Magazine about it. By the way, Jeremy will be joining me for an after chat, so hang around. I promise you, I won't be nearly as entertaining as he. He just doesn't know he's going to be in an after chat yet. It's going to be a surprise. So I'm looking on there, and I see that the cover-up is still a main topic of conversation. It's still a big deal for people. And so I thought, maybe it's time to kind of ask our audience what they think about that whole aspect of it. Because it's not something we talk about. We don't go into so much into that mainstream kind of topic. Because it does tie in with exopolitics and all this disclosure crap. And the first thing that I came across was the FOIA documents that have been kind of squeezed out of the government sources here and there. And I thought back to, years ago when I was watching Stanton Friedman on a show, and he holds up this document. This document is one big black square, effectively unreadable. And I got to thinking about the other day whilst sitting in Jeremy's fart chair at my house. And I thought, if I was petitioned by the listenership of this show, disclose where you live, how much money you make, and what kind of car you drive, and I had the option to censor it, I would draw black lines through everything. And so, if I was somehow mandated that I had to turn over some kind of documentation to you because you requested it, but then effectively made it not readable, what would be the point in sending it to you? In other words, when you see a blanked out document from the government in response to a question about UFOs and what do you know about this event or that event or the whole thing, and you get a blacked out document like that, or even these ones where everything but the most mundane stuff is blacked out, what use is that? I don't know. I almost look at that as like, what's the dog and pony show for? Why don't you just say, we don't have anything? They send you a blacked out document. For what purpose? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. If it's blanked out and making it effectively unreadable, why are you sending it? Why not just easily say, why not save the stamp and say, we don't have anything? No, they send you this showboat document of blacked out lines, which everybody reads between and says, underneath that thin layer of carbon is the answers we want, and they won't give it to us. What if you could effectively lift up that little and just take a peek underneath there? Would there actually be anything there? And if there was, would it have anything to do about UFOs? Likely, if there's anything there at all, likely it would have to do with covering up a black project of some sort. That's my feeling. I'm curious what you guys think about that portion, the documents, because this is a big, big thing in the whole cover-up conspiracy thing. Then you have this whole other part, which is the secret sources and secret leaks that happen. And I think a lot of UFO researchers out there these days, and I'm not picking on him, but I mean, Rich Dolan comes to mind, that I often hear Rich say, my sources say, or, he puts these forth as, these are people on the inside that have confided in him to keep their identity secret, but they want to divulge something. My question is, number one, why? My question number two is, why would a UFO researcher believe them? You're talking about someone who is or was on the quote-unquote inside of this alleged cover-up. They were a part of it, and now they're coming clean. My question is, if, as the mainstream believes, this is as complex and as deep-rooted as they say, what reason would we have to believe these people? These unnamed sources. Why would any researcher say, my unnamed source says, and I trust him? Why would you put faith in someone like that who was, for all intent and purposes, involved at one point or another? That doesn't make sense to me. Now, somebody like Robert Salas with the Malmstrom case, that's a little different to me. That is a witness of an event involving the military. Bentwaters Woodbridge, same thing. That's not what I'm talking about. We have names there. We have people to hold accountable. Unfortunately, when a UFO researcher goes out and writes a book and names, or puts in there, unnamed sources that have confided in me have said this, and that matches up with what my data shows, I have to question, well, number one, is your data being swayed to fit what you think is a reliable source? And number two, why do you put faith in someone who won't come forward? And if they're a part of this, why should we put any stock in anything they say? And number three, why are you laying your rep on the line as a researcher to say, I trust these people and I believe what they say is true? That's the question for me. Why? I don't get that. And so when you're talking about unnamed sources and people, behind the scenes, and a researcher presenting that as some kind of evidence, I'm not buying that. Now, I know that when Rich was on the show, he said, well, I've had different people who couldn't possibly know each other tell me almost identically the same story of whatever story it is. And again, if this is as deep and far-reaching as they claim, does it not make sense that if it's even compartmentalized, even if these two people truly don't know each other, is it such a stretch to say that they've been given the same debriefing document that says, here's what you're to say if you're ever approached by this or you ever find yourself in this situation? Or, God forbid, you're having to seek out a Richard Dolan or whoever in this field, and this is what you're to say. Is that such a stretch? Even from their standpoint? I don't think it is. And so that, for me, renders all of that completely worthless. I find it to be dangerous as a researcher to say, I've got this unnamed source who told me this. You know? I've had people that have done the same thing to me. Like, well, I don't want to talk about this publicly, but this was what was told to me. For instance, a photographer that I was talking about on one of these recent shows that was lowered into a disc. He became disoriented, and inside it was bigger than the spatial quality was outside. It was bigger inside the disc and the object than the building that it was in. It's a weird story. But other people have heard that same story from other people. Can I believe that 100%? No, but I gotta say, I mean, even I'm swayed at something like that. It makes me think. But then when I get myself pulled back from this and I take off my UFO goggles, I go, why should I believe that? The circumstance of meeting them, which in that case was just like completely out of the blue. Then again, if it's as far-reaching as we all think, or the mainstream thinks, I should say, is it such a stretch? I don't know. Is it a planned? Is it all theatrics? Because for me, and I'm curious what you guys think, for me, I think that all of these little subtleties, these documents, the secret leaks, the unnamed sources, Serpo, all of these kind of things that have gone on throughout all of this kind of suck people in and ruin people in this field. I mean, I think we've all seen that at one point or another with some researcher that basically gets these good sources, you know, and then all of a sudden they're led into a case where they're left holding the bag, and then their reputation's ruined. And therefore, when your reputation is ruined in this, when you're left holding the bag, however that may go down, everything that you've done prior in this field is now null and void. It's just like if Jeremy Vaeni tomorrow got caught hoaxing photographs and putting them out on the net, everybody was like, wow, these are amazing. And then it was found out that he hoaxed them and all of that. Then would you have any qualms about dismissing everything that he said thus far, even if that was true? You know, one bad apple, right? I mean, that's how it works. I think somewhere down the line, UFO researchers that have been led into certain situations by these sources or have made certain statements by these sources that have then turned out not to bear true. And we've seen that before in this, where somebody, it's like, okay, there it is, you're left holding the bag. And no matter how many times they'll try to explain themselves, nobody wants to hear it. You're done. So I look at all that and I go, you know, and I know this isn't a popular view, but I'm one of these people who doesn't believe that they know nearly as much as they claim or appear to portray that they do, meaning the government. I don't see any vast cover-up, and of course, most people who perpetuate that, exopolitical folks would go, well, then you haven't looked into it. Well, I have looked into it. I've been around long enough to look into it. I've even had experiences where I've been threatened over things, and, you know, that'll be for another show sometime. But you all know the instance I'm talking about. I mean, I've analyzed that over the years to think, you know, was that all just a theatrical type setup? I don't know. I think they want to portray themselves as having a handle on it, that they know something that we don't know. And therefore, this entire belief system has been built up around blacked out documents, anonymous sources, and stories. And what does that, again, point to in this? This is something that, this is the kind of like what I wanted to focus on tonight, which is the whole notion of ufology becoming a religion. Jeremy and I have said enough times on this show that ufology has consistently taken a downturn over the past 10 years, but I think it's never been more evident than right now. I think that when we said ufology is dead, when we ran that episode and I made that statement, I think it's kind of proven out at this point. Is there going to be a factional split between, well, the factional split has already happened as far as I'm concerned, between mainstream ufology and exopolitics. You know, I think that they've taken a pretty hard hit. Not that it's not deserved. But I think that when you're looking at ufology as ETH nuts and bolts versus people like Jeremy and I, who kind of ride that middle, I think we've said enough times that it can be real when it wants to be, but it doesn't have to be, and it plays into deeper, more complex things. There's that side, and then there's the split, which is the mainstream, which is it's nuts and bolts, it's real. The government has the evidence. They're not sharing it with us. They know it all. And even if they don't, you know, they still know more than we do, and we deserve to know, and that's, of course, raised this whole fervor of exopolitics. So, what do you do with that? There's not much you can do as a researcher, or even somebody who wants to discuss this. There's not a whole lot you can do when the louder voice is one of what I consider to be lunacy. It's become a belief system for so many people. And there was a thread this week on Above Top Secret by a gent out of Scotland who wrote a thread called that abductee threads are liars, or something to that effect, effectually saying in his first post that all these people coming on to Above Top Secret who are, you know, talking about or giving accounts of alien abduction and their abduction experiences are likely liars. They're lying. Yeah, in some rare cases, he believes it might have been hallucinations or drugs or emotional problems, mental states. But by and large, they're lying because there's no evidence. You know, when you see a post like that, I think if you're like me, the first thing you do is you get aggravated. But then you take a step back and you go, well, this almost, and I actually wrote this in the thread. I said, you know, this kind of thing is almost, it's a bait. It's a bait because this person wants attention for an unpopular view on a popular message board that views these things in a positive way. And so to throw a monkey wrench in that from afar with an anonymous name is going to get you attention. It's going to, some people thrive on negative attention. We've mentioned that before. I think that's what this was. And then later on in the thread, he even made a point to say, when people were saying he was arrogant and he was opinionated, he says, that's right, I'm arrogant. You know, and so I said, you know, the fact that somebody is willing to go on a message board and say that they're arrogant kind of, I don't know, kind of speaks to the answer to the equation here, which is that this was done for attention and just to cause a stir. But it also bears out to the fundamentalist skeptic kind of bend, which is, if it doesn't fit into my evidential belief system or what I would consider proof, everybody's lying. So there's your extreme case of someone who refuses to acknowledge the deeper aspects of this. I mean, obviously, let's not pick on this guy from Scotland too much because it seems pretty evident that he hasn't looked into this phenomena with any depth. He's looked at the surface level of He mentioned probes, anal probes, and all this. I mean, all that crap notwithstanding, we're talking about he's likely listened to a lot of people with regression hypnotherapy and the stuff you see on TV and all of that. I mean, come on. In any depth, it's clear he hasn't looked into this because he's not speaking the language that we've been talking about here, which is those deeper aspects. So that's the far one side. Now, the people I believe that he's trying to actually antagonize with a post like that are the dyed-in-the-wool believers, which are the ones that will come in there and read him the riot act. That thread at present moment is shut down by the moderators because people became so incensed at what he was saying. And of course, he's loving this. He's sitting back laughing about it. But, I mean, here I am. I'm a guy who's had some pretty weird shit. And I can see right through it. I'm just like, yeah, well, he's just looking to get a rise out of people. So I didn't go in there and blast anybody. I just said, well, this is to be expected from somebody like this because it almost figures into that fundamentalist skeptic mindset. And it's not so much about, is this true or not? It's about, I need to elevate myself as, some kind of intellectual elitist. And I'm the smartest guy in the room. And I'm going to stand before my congregation of morons, and I'm going to educate them. See? And that's how I see this kind of thing playing out. And I wasn't particularly aggravated by it. I just made my points and kind of sat back, and he never really addressed me directly, even though I spoke directly at him in the thread, referenced his words. And at that point, these preemptive strikes come out. Anybody who would come on ATS and believe these stories outright without any evidence is ignorant. And I just said, well, a preemptive strike like that, demanding that this thing bend to your will of the level of proof that you're looking for, and then basically torpedoing anyone who would respond in any kind of way against you as ignorant is a sign of a weak argument. And it is. To the people who are the hardcore believers, they become absolutely enraged by this. And I was amazed at the amount of just, knives out, And I'm thinking, this is not a discussion anymore. This is a belief system being attacked by people and others coming to the defense of that belief system. And I don't think it's any great stretch to say that we all know there's something to this. What is it? We don't know. For most people, I think, not having any sort of experience at all, I think it's largely an article of faith. There is no hardcore proof here. We all know this. But I'm seeing lately this big influx of, this fever of protecting your preconceived notions of what you think this is. And this is my whole problem with exopolitics and all of that. I mean, it is a belief system. It's effectively become like a religious thing for people. It's a belief, and what amazes me is something like, let's just say Christianity, okay? Let's just look at that. We're not going to pick apart religion here, okay? You take a look at Christianity and you think about, you go to church and you pray, and then you go home. You do your week, you go to work, you come home, you kiss your wife, you make the money, you pay the bills. You go back to work, you do it all over again, 5 days, 6 days. And then you go back to church. And you sit and you pray. And it's very detached, at least to my view. It's a very detached thing. You're not actually involved in anything. You're involved in a relationship with your God, but it's detached. And I think what ufology presents for some people looking for that involvement is that, number one, the phenomena will respond to you. It will respond to you. We've talked about this. And I feel very strongly about that. Number two, you can go to your congregation of a conference with this stuff and speak with like-minded people and get involved in projects like podcasts, like all sorts of, I mean, this is where this goes. You're not only talking about this, you're not only listening to the high priests of ufology up there on the stage, but you're also actively involved in this. This gives you a chance to be actively engaged in a belief system. Both act the same way. There is no tangible proof. We're not going to ignore that as people who believe there's something going on here. But I like to think this audience knows or sees the deeper points that we've been bringing up and has always seen them. And I don't know. Doing this show, I don't feel like we've necessarily educated anybody. I just think we've drawn like-minded people to us. I think that's kind of what we've done. Is we've attracted people who see what we see and see the problems we see with it. And so when you look at these people, I mean, it's like it's giving them something that religion is not. And that's this ability to be actively involved in it, to go out sky watching too. I mean, there's certainly fellowship on both sides, isn't there? And I don't know, is that unhealthy? People can believe what they want to believe. People believe all sorts of crazy shit. So the way this thing has grown into a belief system is really problematic, because now part of the problem with ufology is that it's not critical enough. One story ties into another story from 5 years ago that was long since proven a hoax, but because it fits my preconceived notion of what is and what isn't with this field, I'm in. And then we've got the infighting. And the infighting, again, I've got proof and you don't. Well, that's not proof. Well, what's your definition of proof? I've got this photograph. You don't know what that is, which is true. That could be a secret craft. We don't have technology like that. How do you know? I mean, these are all fervent points to argue with someone who is steeped in a belief system. And therefore, immediately when you attack a belief system, you're attacking that person personally. That cuts them deep. And therefore, they come back at you with something that's totally counterproductive to solving an issue. I think McKenna had it right when he talked about ufology. Everyone claims too much information. And I think, I'm glad to say that at least on this end, I don't have the first fucking clue what's going on. I mean, I want to know. I want to learn more about it. But the whole belief system thing really kind of wigs me out. And I'm seeing more and more and more of it. The one thing that you can say about, at least look at the exopolitics thing again. I mean, unfortunately, this sort of thing is what gets the mainstream attention. And I mean that in a media sense. I mean, it also gets that. I mean, people like us aren't getting a lot of attention because we're not playing into, I don't know, do you all ever see ufology as kind of like a good old boys club? In a way. Jeremy and I talked about this week. I very much do see that. I mean, believe me, we've got a great audience. We've got a huge audience. And I'm amazed by that. But what kind of confounds me is that, I don't know, that a lot of what we do here never seems to make it out to the mainstream. Like Emma Woods, I've been looking on ATS and I haven't seen anything about it. One mention on one post somewhere. It's like that story's never been broken out beyond our borders. It's been on other talk shows. It's been on other podcasts. It's been mentioned, been talked about. I'm talking about the broader sense here. I mean, to access a bigger audience, I guess is what I'm saying. To get your views kind of jammed into that mainstream which, should get a lot more people thinking. I'm always of the opinion the more heads you can get on this, the better off you'll be. To try and do that when you're when you're being ignored because you're rocking the boat too much, that's a problem. This all feeds into the same issue of a belief system. Whether that belief system is garnered around capital gains, popularity, ego, or genuine desire to want to know more. I mean, it doesn't matter. Any way that you cut it, you're butting heads up against this belief system. Another thing that comes up a lot on ATS is, in fact, it's been just recently that apparently they've enacted a policy, and we're going to talk about this, the UFO and alien section. They've enacted a policy essentially that if you were to go on there and talk about an abduction experience, that will no longer remain in the aliens and UFO section. That will be moved to an area called the gray basket. And despite what the moderator told me over there, it is essentially a catch-all basket for any sort of admittance to unprovable events happening to you, or you being aware of them, when you have no proof. And of course, when it comes to an abduction experience, there's very little in the way of, you could have certainly 2 or 3 or more people involved in something like that, and that still doesn't equate to proof. They are now not housing those within aliens and UFO section. And that confounds me. I mean, I'm sure that was a decision by somebody moderating that, but I mean, I can tell from a couple of members that it's really pissed them off. And I come in with this unpopular view, I guess, by this moderator, because one of my threads was actually moved there. And I thought, well, that's weird. That thread's been around for like 4 years and it's still up on, I came on there after not being on for a while and said, wow, somebody's still asking me questions. I'm like, I haven't even been here to read them. And I responded to a couple and then it got moved. And I thought, well, what the hell happened to that thread? And it got put in this basket. And I said, well, wait a minute. You're saying that if a story can't be verified in any tangible way and there's no evidence, then it gets moved to a gray basket. What about every UFO sighting that isn't accompanied by pictures or radar or video or whatever? Shouldn't that be in the gray basket too? I mean, really? I don't get it. I don't get that. And so now that is being definitively separated from a UFO sighting that has zero evidence as well, is nothing but a story or an admittance of an extraordinary event. How's that work? And it wouldn't bother me if it wasn't ATS. I've been around there for a long time, and I've got a lot of fond memories of it, and I've got a lot of aggravated memories of it, but either way, that's kind of like been my second home on the net. And I see this going on there, and I'm thinking, man, what is going on with this field? Not that they're indicative of everything that's going on, but it's more just nonsense to me. I just really don't understand what's going on. Where else would you talk about an alien experience except the UFOs and aliens section? I mean, what sense does that make? I don't say that figures into this whole belief system thematic through this show, but I wanted to mention that because I really just kind of like cocked my head like a dog at that. But, getting back to this whole belief system thing, this is the reason for all of the infighting, all of the nonsense that people believe. I mean, when you've got someone out there that wants so desperately to believe in something like this and feels that they can be ultimately involved in it and is largely an article of faith, And then you start bringing subjects into it like marginality and anti-structure. I mean, they don't know where to go with this. And yet, you're behind the rock because you don't agree with the mainstream, but the mainstream is ruling the day. And so, how are you supposed to get out your information to a broader audience and inject yourself somehow into this mainstream good old boys club that just wants to hold on to the status quo of what it's always been? The government knows everything. They're not telling us this is flesh and blood, nuts and bolts. We have alien bodies. We have, and not a shred of anything. No more than, Jeremy has proof that there's an energy inside him. There's no more proof for that than there is. In fact, he's got an EEG reading. They have blacked out documents. I mean, does anybody see how absurd this is? I mean, I think everybody knows from listening to the show. I've got increasingly frustrated with all of this to the point where it's embarrassing, to say that you're involved in this. Because anybody who bothers to take a casual look at this is going to see, wow, these people are crazy. Because the belief system is in full swing. The religious overtones in all of it are in full swing. And it's really, this is really a very big problem with this. The pedestrian belief systems that are in place, that have been in place probably since day one of modern ufology. It's distressing. I mean, I know we refer to Terrence McKenna a lot on this show, but I'm going to do it again. I mean, the guy stood in front of an audience of UFO attendees, con attendees, and said at one point, what is it about a disc in the air that says extraterrestrial to you? Maybe it's just a disc in the air. And what makes you even think it's flying? And I was like, Jesus Christ, that's brilliant. I mean, yeah, that's it. Everybody claiming so much information and then vehemently defending it because it's all part of their belief system is how do you overcome that? I mean, I don't know that you can. And again, are we going to see this big definitive split between that? I mean, there used to be a definitive split. Actually, I mean, I remember when I, first got into this way back, there was what they referred to as the fringe element. And that fringe element, I mean, dare not to tread that direction because you'll just be bored with stories of all sorts of crazy shit. Stick to the facts. Let's look at the facts. Let's look at the data and the evidence and let's analyze that and let's work on that. And nowadays, what I see is like the fringe has bled into and overtaken much of the critical ufological thinking. I don't know how. I mean, I don't know what. I don't know if it's because of the popularity of the paranormal lately. I mean, we've talked about how the popularity of all this has soared through the roof. I mean, how many shows does one have to have on TV about the paranormal? I mean, there for a while it was ridiculous how many were on. So is it just a more influx of more people who just, want to believe in something or feel like this is an interesting hobby? I don't know. So I don't know. Are we going to see a big definitive split? I think we are. I think we're going to see this thing split off in several different directions, which may be as counterproductive as, what it is right now. I don't know. But where do you go? I mean, where do you go? I mean, I find it very hard sometimes to go into the mainstream barometer of ATS and have a discussion because it's just not there. It's not, some people definitely can get involved with some of the deeper aspects of this. But by and large, it's like people are saying, well, how do you know it's not flesh and blood aliens? Well, I don't, but let's look at, and then you've got to go through your whole explanation of why you don't think it's this, and because the evidence doesn't support that. And not even the data supports that. Even the anecdotal data doesn't support that. And so where do you go? How does it become a belief system? That's what I'm the most curious about. And I think I've said before that, I'm very interested in the subject itself, but I'm even more interested in how people react to it. Because people's human reaction to the unknown is never ceases to amaze me. I mean, it can run the gambit of tying yourself down in countless hours of highly critical analysis of this or that to chat in front of palm trees and Bermuda shorts. I mean, it goes from one end of the spectrum to the other. And why? Me and Jeremy have joked, are people getting stupider? Is that what it is? Is that what it is? I mean, is that what's going on here? Is 2012, is that whole fervor plugging into this in some way? I don't know. I mean, there's just some really outrageous stuff going on. And I think that, I think it's great to come on our board and on other boards like it and discuss the things we do. But I think that ultimately, don't you have to pull the reins back at some point, and you got to take those UFO goggles off and really look at this thing from an outside perspective, as hard as that may be to do, and say, what is going on here? Look at this, and look at this, and look at that. And that's the majority of the interested public in this, is what they're being fed. And so I think all we can do in the meantime is continue to question everything, continue to call it out where we see it. As unpopular as that is to the mainstream, I think you have to continue to call it out, and at some point, maybe it'll turn around. I doubt it, because as I said, I think the fringe is largely in the driver's seat these days. And I'm curious what you guys think. I mean, do you see it the same way I do? Are you as disgusted by the larger conglomerate as I am? I mean, or am I just frustrated? I don't know. I mean, that's kind of where I've been taking it lately, and I've just been looking a lot at ATS and other boards and listening to I've listened to Coast to Coast about the past week or so, and I'm just like, really? Is this how far it's gone? I mean, really? I don't know. I'd be curious to hear what you guys think about why does it become a belief system, other than what I've mentioned tonight about becoming actively involved. What does it do for people? I mean, it's not like everybody believes in benevolent space brothers. I mean, there's a lot of worry and genuine concern by some people that these things are taking over, or a hybrid race is being invented to repopulate the planet. I mean, that's worrisome stuff. I mean, what's the advantage of believing in something like that? I don't know. But anyway, we'll be back after this with me and Chair. See ya.
Hi, my name's Greg Bishop, and you're listening to Paratopia, where I just got asked questions that I never get asked, and got to talk about things that I never get to talk about.
If you record audio for any purpose, chances are you want it to be heard. You want to attract the largest audience possible who can hear your message. That's where we come in. We're cyberears.com, a revolutionary internet service that will host your audio files and help you promote and track its popularity. Considering hosting a podcast to the world? We have all the automated tools to make the process as simple and easy as it can be. No technical mumbo-jumbo to work out. CyberEars.com does all the work for you. You record it, we take care of the rest. So don't delay. Go to CyberEars.com today and register for a free trial account. Upload your audio files and get heard. With CyberEars.com, it's your audio on your terms.
for esoteric research and investigation into the enigmatic. Eerie Radio is a weekly podcast that features interviews with the world's leading paranormal researchers. Download episodes of Eerie Radio from your favorite podcatcher or directly from the show website at www.eerieradio.com. Eerie Radio. Listen, learn, laugh.
So the Jeff.
No.
What?
My fucking solo show.
Go ahead.
So the Jer.
So the Jeff. Why have you called me here?
Oh, that's right. You haven't heard the show yet.
Yeah, this is going to be real productive after chat.
It's quite an abortion this week. I just riffed. No, I mean, I basically was talking about. I started doing a show about the whole government cover-up and what I find objectionable about it. And then I kind of, like, towards the end of it, I'd done an hour and a half of discussion on that with myself. And
how did you treat yourself, by the way?
Pretty good.
Oh, nice.
And I don't know, I kind of got to a point in it where I said, wow, this is all really hinging on a bigger issue for me, and one that I find infinitely more interesting than this whole cover-up routine, which is that the notion that ufology has become an effective religion for people. I touched upon using Above Top Secret as it's kind of become like a barometer for me in what people are interested in talking about when it comes to this subject. I think them being the largest of their kind on the internet for that subject, I think you get a decent cross-section of mush-minded morons and really smart people. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to see, like, what are they talking about? And the ebb and flow of interest in this as a whole. And one of the things that again comes up is this whole government conspiracy thing. I talked to you earlier about, the notion of documents and secret leaks and unnamed sources and all of these sort of things. And kind of how they play out. I'm not sure if I can't even remember what the hell I said 10 minutes ago. So what do you want? I have Jacobitis. Somebody like Rich Dolan, who kind of puts himself out there with an unnamed source and says, they've told me this, and there's a guy halfway across the country that doesn't know anything about, subject A, and he told me something very similar. They don't know each other. They haven't compared notes. And, kind of my aspect on that is even going from the mainstream viewpoint of how complex and far-reaching this conspiracy or alleged conspiracy is, doesn't it make sense that on some level that if you're going to be talking to UFO researchers as some kind of leak, you've got to have a debriefing paper presented to you in some way? I mean, is that so out of the scope of thought that it still couldn't be part of a cover of something, and therefore putting yourself out on a limb as a researcher saying, I know this guy and I know this guy and I believe they're sincere, and so here it is. I mean, to float yourself out on that, I just find that to be, like, dangerous.
Yeah, well, I mean, you got to think about these people who are coming forward anonymously. I mean, what are they risking? Are they risking treason by talking? Like, what's at stake for them that they would be willing to talk to, a historian of no repute in the real world, although he's held high in ufology. But I mean, nobody in ufology is held high in the real world. So, what would be so important to talk to him about that would be, you'd risk everything,
right?
And that could go, and that's not just Dolan. That's anyone in ufology, Bassett, you name it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Now, is this stuff that you did put in the show, or is this stuff that you nixed in favor of whatever it is that you put in the show?
No, it's still in there. I mean, you can listen to it. It's still in there. No, I mean, I still brought these things up, and
because you don't want to just repeat the show in this after chat.
No. I mean, I'm curious. I mean, it is hard for you to do without listening to it.
Paratopia, if I'm just joining you, it's because Jeff and I took a 5-minute breather so that he could explain to me exactly what his episode was about, since I have not heard it yet. And now that I know, we shall discuss.
Right.
Go ahead, discuss.
I have nothing more to say.
Oh,
That's
right. You've just spent 45 minutes.
Can I put a preemptive strike of my own out that this was completely off the fly and I was not prepared to do this?
Oh, yeah.
In any way, shape, or form this week?
No, in fact,
it's totally at the fly. What is it, 1:08, 1:09 a.m.?
Yeah, I called or emailed you yesterday and was like, we had something fall through. We did an episode this week, but let's say we had some audio issues and leave it at that. We had some audio issues. Yeah. So I was like, Jeff, we either have nothing or you do something or we do something. And he said, I'll do it.
Yeah, dummy.
But I'm sure whatever you did was brilliant and people will love it.
Not
because they're prone to love the Jeff Ritzmann.
I even said beforehand, I said, Jeremy's not here and I can guarantee I won't be nearly as interesting as him.
But people might actually agree with what you have to say.
Well,
so.
I mean, it was basically just me talking about, the perspective as of late and commiserating. Because ufology does need to be commiserated over a bit lately, I think.
Well, let me ask you. So this thread on ATS that got sort of censored and then locked.
Yeah.
You said that it got heated in there. What was it? I mean, things get heated all the time in forums. What was so bad that they needed to actually lock it and censor things?
Well, I mean,
that he was so arrogant that he didn't agree. I mean, they don't lock and censor like moon anomalies threads or Richard Hoagland was right threads or
right.
insert bullshit here threads.
Right. No, this was to be honest with you, and I mean, I don't mean to defend the guys from Scotland. That's how I kind of like this gent from Scotland.
Was it Colin Reed?
No, I hope not. I mean, I didn't find him to be offensive. I think that he basically just stated his opinion. And it's a very, very unpopular opinion. Sound familiar to us? And I thought, okay, I didn't necessarily get pissed over it, but certainly a lot of people on that board did. And I think it started to enter for the original poster, he began to get attacked, what he felt was personal attacks. I read them. I didn't necessarily see them as anything but confirming what he had already said, which was that he was arrogant and opinionated, and if you don't like it, tough shit. Which again, I said during the episode, I think that kind of spoke volumes to his initial reason for starting the post in the first place.
Well, here's a question. So he's arrogant and whatever, but is he wrong?
I
mean, we are talking about ATS here.
Yeah, I know. And like I said, I see that as a decent cross section. And I do kind of use it as a barometer of sorts. I think anybody who goes on there to talk about an experience that they're clearly uncomfortable going into in any great depth, they're putting the feelers out. I can tell in a lot of these threads where people are talking about their abduction experiences or whatever you want to call them. They're ready to share it. They want to share it. They want opinions on what happened or what they may say about it. And people genuinely seem to enjoy those. Nobody just walks in, I think, off the street and just immediately posts, I've been abducted and here's my story. These are usually people who've been around for a number of weeks and then all of a sudden they come out and go, well, yeah, I kind of had this. And everybody's like, really? Do tell more, please. I mean, I did that after being there a couple of years, actually. And that was only at the behest of people asking, what are you so intense about this whole hoax thing? Why do you get so personally insulted by that? And so then I explained why. I think by and large, a decent number of the people on there who have an experience to talk about are being genuine about it. You can immediately tell the ones that are just poking fun or trying to tell a good Serpo story or what have you. They're pretty easy to pick out, at least for me.
Do other people pick them out, or do they go on to page after page? Now, so why is it that people are discriminating against those stories, but not against the Serpo type stories?
Well, isn't that fascinating? Because I brought up the fact that now at ATS, and and I'm not sure if I've told you this or not, in the alien and UFO section, you can no longer talk about alien experiences. That's right. They will be moved to the gray basket, which is essentially, I read the gray basket. It's a catch-all for every kind of admittance or any sort of, I don't know, anybody who's got a horrid tale to tell but has no proof of it, it goes in that form.
That's all of them.
Right. This is what I said. This is the point I argued. It's like, and believe me, this is not an attack on ATS in any form. It's just, I don't know if it's a moderator issue or what, but I said, what do you do when you have somebody come in that has a sighting and they have no pictures? It's the same thing. What the hell?
Well, what do you do if you come in your Serpo and you're like, I'm anonymous and I will only speak to Richard Doty?
Right. Yeah. I mean,
that'll go on for months in the UFO section.
I don't know, man. It just gets more and more absurd. And I came across this, and I only realized this because my own thread got moved. And so here comes a guy in. They shut the thread down because it just got so heated. And I thought, wow, why would they shut that down? This was a really hot thread. And despite that, a lot of people were ignoring what the original poster had said. We started kind of going in another direction with it, almost in a way. But some people kept coming in and chiming in with their little pseudo-personal attacks on the original poster. But what amazed me was not only the level of heat or how aggravated they seemed to be at this poster, but that if they're so worried about everybody being treated kindly, like no personal attacks, well, what could be more of a personal attack than coming on a UFO and aliens message board and calling every experiencer who's admitted a story a liar?
Right.
Why would you let that stand there? I mean, what is going on? And this is not a finger pointed directly at ATS. This is like all over the place in this field.
Well, I don't think they've thought of it that way. I think that's the
problem. I mean, it seems to me to be pretty damn obvious. I mean, when you walk into a thread and start it, these people are liars and flatly say that sounds to me like that's a personal attack on people in the forum, and that shouldn't be allowed. But yet they allowed it to continue to the point, knowing it was a firestorm about to happen, and yet it was still allowed to stand there. And despite the fact that it's talking about something that should have been regulated by their rules to the gray basket, but it wasn't. I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's like everything just goes discombobulated when it comes to discussing anything about this stuff. But the level of heat that came off in this thread wasn't that bad, but I suppose bad enough for them to lock it. And then that leads me into the whole discussion of how people are treating this like a religion. And I actually asked our audience at the end of my little spiel, why do we think, I know my reasons for thinking that it's kind of evolved into original and why it's become that for some people. Why do you think it's become that?
I think for a good number of reasons. I think, once again, anytime you have something that's unknown, you're going to grasp at straws and try to form a meaning and try to, superimpose your own meaning onto it. And then, of course, that's a lie, so you have to get other people to believe it in order for it to appear to be true. And that's how religions are formed, right? I mean, it's like, I've got this theory of how things work, and I know that it's bullshit unconsciously, and so I've got to attract everyone else to it and then defend it.
To validate it, yeah.
Yeah, so that it no longer feels like bullshit. I was also thinking in terms of how you were saying that ufology used to be pretty good. There used to be some scientists involved and all that. And ever since the internet, not so much. I wonder if that's an American phenomenon or if that's all around the world. Like, I wonder if part of the problem isn't that education in the U.S. has gone downhill over the decades, and so people are just generally, dumber, coupled with Maggie Jackson's distracted,
Yeah.
We're just desensitized and stupid and kind of want answers handed to us.
And can I cut in and say right now that Jeremy has not listened to what I recorded because I just did it. and rang him on the phone and said, "Get on Skype and let's do an after chat." That is precisely what I said.
Are you serious?
I said, "Are people getting?" I said, "I think people are getting dumber."
Yeah.
I mean, whether or not that made the final cut or not, I don't know. But I did say it. I said, Jeremy, to have this discussion, like, are people just getting dumber? Is that what it is? I mean, is it really that simple? I mean, I
think it is that simple. I mean, I think we're a little bit soft. You know, I mean, I just think about, like, for instance, the guy seems, in the end, this guy seems nice enough, so I don't want to pick on him too badly, but I'll keep him anonymous, but he's a listener, so maybe he'll know it's him. Someone had invited me to film me in a documentary.
Mm-hmm.
He was going to fly me out to LA and film me in this documentary, and his emails to me got progressively more and more illiterate to the point where they were almost unintelligible by the end. And let's say his savoir-faire was, I don't know, less than savoir-faire. So, you know, he's saying things that were kind of inappropriate that you wouldn't say to someone you're trying to, like, get to do your documentary for free, you know?
God, I want to see these. Okay.
So I called him out on that stuff, and then he apologized and just said, I'm sorry they got illiterate. I just free associate or what, whatever. I was just riffing off the top of my head. But the fact that anyone, I mean, he's got to have a budget, right? He wants to fly me out, put me in a hotel, all of this. Thinks that it's okay to write illiterate emails to try to entice anyone, and then, like, insult them in a way that I guess maybe you would do if you knew somebody and you were joking around with them, but he doesn't know me. Right. I think all of that, like that level of unprofessionalism, I think indicates something, because this isn't the first time that I've seen this level of unprofessionalism from somebody. And I don't think that would even cross anyone's mind, say, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, to be that dipshitty about something important to you that you're going to spend money on,
right.
I don't know. It just seems to be all around us.
So you can tell Jeremy has a much better rap than I do because he uses words like dipshitty and savoir-faire. So I just want to point that out for listeners.
That's right.
I mean, the thing that I said about it becoming a belief system for people, just to get back for that for a second, was that ultimately I think people want to be involved in their belief system and going to church. Like I said, let's not pick on Christianity here, but you go to church, you pray, you go home, you do your job, you come home, you kiss the wife, blah, blah, blah. And doesn't ufology, give you, I mean, certainly the fellowship is there, right? I mean, you've got that from church, but you've also got the ability that church doesn't give you, which is to be like actively involved directly in a phenomena itself. I think that is an extremely attractive feature.
Well, it's also
that it
fake smarts.
Right.
It's not just a substitute religion, it's a substitute it's a substitute for being an intellectual.
Right.
Yeah, because you can, like, quote unquote, study this subject and be every bit as smart as anyone you hear on the radio who also studies the subject in the end, Mm-hmm. You and I can go on a message board and a moron can come in and chat with us, and that we can all appear to be on the same level thanks to, the internet.
Yeah.
So that's very attractive. There's no college course for this. You're not going to get a graduate degree in ufology.
True. Yeah, right.
So I think all of that is attractive. And then, of course, I think it, of course, leans more toward religion than the intellectual part, simply because I don't think people use it for intellectual stimulation. They use it as a cover to feel smart, but they really are. I think what it is there for is for their imagination to go wild and for them to feel that little bit of, I don't know, that gleaning of spirituality or whatever that little feeling is you get when you feel like you're really onto something.
Yeah. Well, nobody can resist a good mystery, right? I mean, that's probably part of it as well.
Yeah.
But I mean, they can be actively involved in it. I mean, meaning, you don't go out to a field and stare into the dark and shine lasers in the air to see Jesus Christ. That's not the way it works. I mean, with this, you could, not that you're going to get anywhere with it, but you could go out and skywatch. You can engage the phenomena point blank if you want to. And I think people, I mean, this is the whole premise behind Greer's thing is like, let's engage this thing rather than study it from afar. Let's go out and engage it. And I think that's part of the real attraction for his little thing, which effectually for me looks like religion too. You can become actively involved in interacting with whatever this is.
Well, and here's the thing:
whether or not you're fooling yourself with it is a whole nother matter.
Well, that's just it. But see, you just said whether or not you're fooling yourself. The problem is that most people don't get to that sentence. Right. They don't care if they fool themselves.
Right? They love that. That's the D&D factor.
They would love to see. They would love nothing more than to see satellites float across the sky and think they're UFOs, and for you to tell them they're satellites will be a huge disappointment or a lie to them.
Right. and an attack on their belief system,
right?
Which are so aggressively defended that, like I said at the end of the thing, it's like it's a big mess, and this is largely the cause of it is because everybody's put their pedestrian notions onto this, developed their own personal belief system around it, effectually acting like a religion, or they get together in bands like exopolitics, like CSETI, like all of these different things, and it effectively becomes, that religion. And then to attack that is not anything to do with the reality of the phenomena or the questionability of it. It has to do with you're attacking me. It's all taken very personally. And so in the end, no real work gets done because everybody's doing nothing but arguing about who's right and who's wrong. When in fact, nobody's right because we don't know what the hell's going on.
Well, nobody's right, but some people are wrong. And to be factually accurate is to be the enemy. That's what we're saying here.
Well, and
you're a snob. You're an asshole. Why are you doing this? Why are you a debunker?
Right.
It's like, no, it's actually just a fucking satellite moving across the sky.
Right.
Just deal with that.
And see, listeners, this is what I meant when I said the UFO field effectively acting like a good old boys club. It's like, unless you play nice, you're not, I kind of commiserated, Jero, on the notion of how do you get some of the stuff that we've brought out in this show, like Lilienfeld, like Emma, like that stuff still hasn't really, I feel, crested the absolute big ball mainstream sphere here. And it long should have. Mm-hmm. But I think because that, to question this, to question people in this, to call people out on certain things is to you become the redheaded stepchild. You're disowned and you're ignored. And so how do you present or how do you get to that bigger audience when that bigger audience has already been poisoned against you in some way? That's kind of how I feel these days.
Yeah, the audience is part of it, but the people running the show are also the problem. I mean, the thing that the cowards in this field hide behind is we're all in this together. Can't we all just work together? Yes. We all are going after the same goals here. Why don't we all just... Right. I mean, seeing Paula Harris speak was the greatest example of this, where she very clearly put a bunch of, made some outlandish statements about Billy Meyer being real in her presentation. She put up some photos of UFOs and I believe some footage of UFOs that have been long debunked. And after going around and around in circles about it, ultimately said, well, I'm going to leave it in there because it's aesthetically pleasing. It just looks better. So it looks better. Trumps factually accurate information.
Right.
I mean, that's it. And then to argue the point is to then get her saying, look, can't we all just get along? I mean, we're all in this together. We shouldn't be fighting each other.
Right.
Yeah. No, you're part of the fucking problem. I mean, I'm a broken record about this at this point,
Yeah. Well, I'm sure a good bit of what I said, I've probably said a million times on the show, but it still bears mentioning. Do you think, this is one of the questions I asked everybody out there, is do you think at some point, do you see a split happening? I mean, I think we've certainly already seen a split from the mainstream and exopolitics. I think exopolitics is kind of starting to get peaked for what it actually is. And a lot of people seem to not be as engaged by it as they used to be. Do you see a bigger split coming for, I don't know, what we used to deem the fringe element in this, which seems to have taken the front seat in recent years? Do you see this splitting off into, I don't know, people who would listen to this show and look at deeper aspects of this, and people who would, rather go to an exit politics thing. I mean, that you see a definitive split. Oh yeah, well,
here's the problem. What's the age range here? I mean, as we've said, all the people that we see at these conferences are elderly, or a lot of them are. A lot of them are older. Is there a younger crop of interested people in this? I mean, I know there are a handful of, I guess, quote unquote colleagues, for lack of a better term, that we know of. But I don't see it being reflected in the faces in the audience. Right. And the older people, as we know, want to be lied to. Right. So I don't know. I mean, we need to raise a new crop of people, but how do you get... I mean, maybe it is a good sign that less and, younger people are interested, because maybe they do find other things more stimulating than bullshit.
Well, yeah. Well, that's true. That's true.
But I don't know. I would hope that that's the case,
Yeah, I mean, I said I don't really see any other way, other than to do what I've said before, which is to hunker down and do your own thing.
Well, here's something. Leslie Keane is going to go on the Colbert Report on Monday, I believe. Monday.
Okay.
Unless it's a week from Monday. But, so, I mean, there's your Gen X, Gen Y crowd, right? That she's going to be speaking to. So maybe she's got a chance here of making this seem legitimate to a younger audience. And then maybe we can see what's what. I wonder what would happen if those people are attracted to what she has to say and then, check it out and look online at stuff. And then, will they immediately be turned off because there's so much shit out there? I just wonder.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? I mean, when you've got the fringe in the front seat driving the bus, anybody who gets on the bus and looks at the bus driver and sees the retard in the seat, what are you going to do? You're getting off the fucking bus. I got news for you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's my commiseration with this stuff right now. It's like, we're still, I think, trying to engage this stuff in different ways, but everything else just seems to be on the steady decline of bizarre editing and closing of threads on what was normally a pretty open-faced message board. And, I actually got a private message on ATS about how mean people are being to each other. I mean, across the board, not just the UFO and alien section, but across all of ATS. I mean, you don't get a message like that unless it's reached some kind of biblical proportions there. And, what the hell is that all about? I mean, I wonder, are you going to see a split across all of this stuff? The conspiracy theorists and the ufologists and the ghost people. I mean, is there really going to come where an axe is going to fall and either, what side is going to be more recognized is going to be the question, I guess. What are more people going to identify with?
I don't remember. Geez, who was I having this conversation with the other night? Maybe it might have been you. It might have been Banal. Where I was saying, I kind of hope there isn't disclosure, because if there is disclosure, it's going to be the morons who step up, who are the loudest, because morons are always the loudest. We know that from daytime talk shows and from life.
Right.
So they're going to be the ones to step up and go, see, I told you so, and now here's the prepackaged bullshit I'm going to sell you that will make sense of this for you. So I kind of feel like it's weird. It's like to have Leslie Keane, who is seemingly a legit person, really pushing for government disclosure. I mean, I wonder, I would like to ask her, do you think that the Bassetts and the Greers of the world are just going to just take the message, and take the microphone out of your hand and own it at that point? And then did anything get disclosed? Right. Like you could disclose aliens are here and then have someone else tell you what that means. And then the truth was it never got there. The message never quite got out what it meant. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah. I mean, the problem is that, go back to the root issue, disclosure. How many times have we heard this now? Christ, every summer it seems that we get another, it's coming. And I've been hearing that for 23 years. Give me a break. I think it's amusing that people in this field, the more popular or recognized the field is in the media, they kind of use that to gauge, like, okay, well, that means that it's all going to be coming out soon because it's so popular right now. They know people are ready. And I don't, if there is such a thing as it all being covered up and what they know and what they don't know, I don't think that has anything to do with the level of interest publicly that's paid to it. Oh, hey, Jer, they're ready. Should we tell them? What? No. I don't see that. I mean, well, first of all, there's no reason for them to. I mean, what reason would they have to? I think like everything else, it will come out, if there is anything to know at all, it will come out when it can no longer be avoided. Mm-hmm. Well, we can't deny it now. All right. Well, we just look stupid if we say, no, there's nothing to it. And there's a 70-meter disc hanging over the Empire State Building for 5 hours.
Well, do you find it odd that, these other countries that are coming out,
mm-hmm.
They're not saying what the data means. They're just saying, right. Here it is.
Right.
Interpret it as you will.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean...
What is that an admittance of?
Yeah,
right.
I mean, is that something the U.S. would do? Here's the sad irony. We would be completely satisfied with that. Exopolitics would love nothing more than to just have the admittance that this is going on, here's the data, and now you tell everyone what it means. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
They could totally get away with that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they are in other countries.
Right.
And maybe that's why exopolitics is seemingly growing, or at least they've taken it on tour in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Australia, because maybe these European countries are coming out with this stuff. So it's,
right.
Something they talk about openly, and these guys can sweep in there and make some money.
Man, I don't know. Again, I mean, people point to these releases of documents like, what is it, Brazil or somebody is.
Right.
I mean, yeah, I mean, that's great. I think in the part of the show that I probably got rid of, I said, this was when I was really into talking about the whole conspiracy thing. Where do you go with that? I mean, it's like, if they know something, great. They've certainly got better data. Okay, let's have that. I still don't think you're going to get that cream of the crop gun camera footage from a pilot who chased one down to within, 50 yards. You're not seeing that. I mean, that's not coming out. I think that the data that they're releasing is as ambiguous as what the grassroots organizations have gotten to over the years on their own. Yeah, it's backed up by more resources. I mean, the resources that a government would have to study this would be phenomenal. So certainly if there's better data to be had, they would have it if they studied it with their resources. But past that, does that really mean they know anything about what's going on? No, it doesn't. And I think, at least in terms of what you're saying with the foreign countries releasing what they are, that's kind of bearing out. Like, we chased it, we don't know. They're not saying anything about what they think it is.
Here's something else, but I'm going to steal from Banal that he had said to me the other day, which is that disclosure, in a way, is about perspective. Mm-hmm. Like, if you were to disclose to your dog, look, you're my pet, I own you, you pretty much are just there for my amusement, the dog could very well turn around and be like, no, you don't get it, dude. You clean my shit, you feed me, and you let me out whenever I need to go out. You're my slave.
Right.
You can't convince that dog that he's the slave and you're the master.
Right.
And it's true. So I don't even know, what would the disclosure be in those terms, outside of okay, we know that something is here. Because for all I know, these, if there are aliens who are going, you know what, or crypto-terrestrials or whatever going, don't nuke the Earth. Please take care of it and all that, because it impacts them. Then right. Our arrogant answer could be, well, you know what? Why don't you clean up our shit? Because it's our place, and we're just not going to do that.
Bow before us, alien.
Yeah, I mean, the balance of power, obviously we have some power if they're just asking and not taking over and doing it for us, right?
Well, you go back to the whole cover-up thing. It's like, would there be a cover-up if the phenomena itself wasn't elusive?
Right.
I mean, this is all the problems, and it amuses me to look at the broader scope of what people have to talk about when it comes to this field, and that's 90% of what people talk about is disclosure, the cover up, what the government knows, what they don't know. They know this, they've got that, and still not a shred of anything of really any substance coming out besides the dog and pony blacked out documents. And
well, here's another thing,
and it just doesn't go anywhere.
We might have talked about this privately, but just to throw another wrench in there, because we always hear with these cover-ups that there's like a secret government controlling everything, really, and
right.
They're the ones who don't want anything out. We all know that Bill Clinton looked into whether or not there were UFOs and how JFK died, right? I mean, he admitted that. People all know that, and it's taken as fact. He's talked about it, whatever.
Right.
Didn't find anything out. If he were controlled, if he were a puppet president, why would he bother to ask? He would either be let in on the secret, or he would know not to ask anything unpuppet-like. Right?
Right.
How come nobody said that? We've got to I think we've got to nail down what is our story that we think is going on. Do we really think that the government is evil and in control, or do we think that anyone who comes out and claims to be a whistleblower anonymously is a good person and not part of that mechanism? I mean, how does that make sense? How does the Bill Clinton thing make sense? How does releasing documents that are all blacked out but 2 words make sense?
Right. Yeah. That's the question, right? I mean, I said during the show on my own here, I said, we got to end up in the end taking off our goggles of ufological goggles and taking a look at the broader picture at all this stuff. Again, it's like you can sit and you can get a UFO photo and sit there and analyze pixel by pixel what you're looking at. And until you step back from that photograph and take a real hard look at it without trying to pick apart every little bit. I mean, it's like we tend to overcomplicate things as a species, I think. In general, we try to overanalyze and over-examine everything. I mean, if you step back and take a larger grasp of ufology, I think you and I would go, "What are we doing here?" Sound familiar? I mean, that's it. I mean, and I think at some point you've really, with all of this stuff, with the disclosure, with the cover up, with all this, you take a step back and look at it and go, "Okay, what do we really have here?" And the answer is, not much. Not much, to which everything has been built on.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Well, now I'm on this thread of, I'm getting back to something here, releasing, disclosing without disclosing, releasing the data without telling anyone what it means. That is what they're doing, right? That's what Britain did. That's what Brazil's going to do. That's what Chile does. That's what France is doing. I mean, that's what they're all doing, right? They're saying, well, here it is. So what did they disclose? I'm trying to figure that out, because the skeptic certainly didn't look at Britain's vast reams of data and go, oh my God, there's an alien presence here on Earth.
Right.
They went, look, there's really nothing here that's completely unexplainable.
Right.
Now, whether that's because they looked at it and decided that, or didn't look at it and decided that, the point is they can afford to do either, because no one in officialdom has told them what it means. So there's still that option to get your message out of what it means. You can tell people what it means.
And the mainstream's response to that would be, don't you get it, Jeremy? They're priming us. They're gauging public interest on what they're releasing now, and they're slowly leading us into the answer. That would be what you would get in a response from that side.
Yes, they've been slowly doing this for quite some time now.
Right. It started with commercials and children's television. Teletubbies, anyone? It all started back when they were running Duracell battery commercials and having what was the Duracell commercial was, we would have had some great UFO photos if we'd have had Duracells in our camera. And it started with the indoctrination process based off the Brookings Institution, which said the easiest way to avoid acculturation and to make people genuinely aware that there's another presence here is to slowly indoctrinate them through subliminal advertising and all this kind of thing. So they point to that and say, okay, it's been a progression all the way up to now where they're actually releasing documents. And it's all about gauging how we respond to this. And then they'll give us a little bit more. And it's going to be this gradated thing. I'm not buying that.
Yeah, I'm not buying that either. In fact, remember, I don't know, right before 9/11 when we were all like semi at peace. Mm-hmm. And the big thing was, well, the next big war, World War III, will be a fake war that they have with aliens. Remember, that was like the fear, is like they're going to set up a fake war with aliens?
Right.
And then, of course, 9/11 happens, and then you've got conspiracy theorists saying that was a fake gateway into fake wars.
Right.
But, so either way you fall on that, whether it was faked or it was real, no aliens. They missed their chance, right? They missed their opportunity.
Right.
So how long do we need to go with this? I mean, it seems to me at the point where a lot of people are saying, I bet they're going to fake a war with aliens. I think at that point you can pretty much come out with whatever you have about aliens. I think people are pretty acclimated at that point.
Right.
Where they just assume it's going to happen anyway.
Right. Yeah.
So,
I mean, good Lord.
What do you do with that?
What do you do with that? I'll tell you what you do. You do what we're going to do right now, which is to put our head down and plow through. That's what you do.
I mean, it really feels like these people who promote this sort of stuff, exopolitics or, children's programming nonsense, is they're biding their time until they can latch on to something shinier.
Like Chetton is short.
Yeah. Well, not Chetton is, like, even that's biding your time. It's like, let's just throw shit out there to bide our time until a fact hits us in the face, and then we can latch onto that and exploit it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that. So what do you think, Joe? I think we should end this abortion and and look forward to the next episode of Paratopia. I'd like to apologize to all our listeners for my part of the episode tonight.
I'm a fan of the bitch fest. So.
Well, I don't necessarily say it was that, but
well, this was.
I don't even remember what the hell I said. So, because you know what? It's hard, man. I don't know how you do it. I really don't. I mean, that's the first time I've been on my own since the second eclipse. Mm-hmm. I've tried to start the show like 7 times, and I get like 15 minutes in, and I'm like, crap, and then go back. It's a bitch, man. And especially when you're not prepared, like I was tonight, and had no particular topic. So,
I'm sure it was lovely.
Either way, I hope it was somewhat thought-provoking, at least in the thought of Jeff's an idiot.
Yeah, and if not, then I'll just replace it with like a test pattern or something.
Thanks. All right. Well, we'll see everybody next week, I suppose, right?
I suppose. Do we have anything to announce or anything like that? I feel like we're missing something.
Nope, I'm good.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Toodles.
Hello, Paratopia. Hello, Jeff. After listening to the episode, I do have just a few comments I want to make. One is on the idea that all religions are disengaging and that's why people are attracted to ufology. I think that's more true of the Catholic Church and Protestant Church and even the Unitarian Church and other churches, Jehovah's Witness, Mormon, things that are pretty cut and paste, cut and dry, mechanical. But then you have things like Pentecostal, which they start speaking in tongues, or evangelical, where I think it's the same sort of thing. Even Baptist. Or you have things like whirling dervishes with their twirling. I don't know. Buddhism or Hinduism, where people meditate and turn inward and engage themselves or engage the rich realms of mind that way. Do we include those? It would be interesting to see maybe, like there's ever going to be a study done. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that somebody did a study on how interest in ufology breaks down along religious lines. It would be interesting to see if the people who have less emotionally engaging and spiritually engaging, if you include talking in tongues and that sort of thing as spiritual, see if those more mechanically minded religious people have a greater attraction to ufology, and also gauge what type of attraction they have. I just think that would be an interesting study. Is it superficial? Is it deep? Is it Dungeons and Dragons? Is it fulfilling? And then a second thing I wanted to address is Jeff's notion that we're not teaching anyone anything. I don't know how you can say that when we've actually gotten feedback from people saying that that's exactly what we're doing. I think where you get pessimistic is in thinking that we're preaching to the choir, and partly that's true, but people are a program already in progress. So those with what we would consider faulty points of view or limited points of view might listen to our show and have their minds changed. That said, a certain type of person is going to be more attracted to our show or less likely to turn it off. But that doesn't mean they're the choir either. That means that they are of like mind, whether they know or care about the paranormal and ufology or not. The type of person who's on the same page as we are mentally, for lack of a better term. But they would be on the same page with us about anything, right? And so if we were to have a conversation about politics, literature, television, music, any of this sort of stuff, we would be able to gauge how right or wrong we are about something in relationship to like-minded people, right? I mean, that's what we do. That's what we know ourselves in relationship to other people. And so we know that there are people who are attracted to our show who otherwise would not pay attention to the paranormal, to UFOs, or any of that stuff. And the reason that they stick with it is because they are like-minded, and therefore we pass their smell test. If we didn't pass their smell test, they would let us know, or they would shut us off. Does that make sense? If you argue a point in a room full of like-minded people, and they all say you're full of shit, odds are you're full of shit. Because they get where you're coming from, they get what you're saying, but there's a deep fallacy in what you're saying, and they're calling you out on it. But like-minded people who listen to our show are not calling us out on it, and many of those people are, again, people who otherwise wouldn't even be listening to a paranormal show. So I think you can teach people something, like-minded people or people who are open to hear this. And then part of it also is, I think it's possible we're articulating some things that people might have felt but not been able to put into words until now. So I'm just saying, I'm not so pessimistic that, oh, we're not doing anything here. Woe is me. No, I think we are doing something here. Taking a big old shit on ufology. No, I kid ufology. I love. What? And finally, I thought of another reason that the Emma Woods / Scott Lilienfeld stuff hasn't broken, which is that it hasn't gotten major radio play, for the simple fact that Emma Woods doesn't want to do interviews. It took a lot for her to do our show, and she did the Land Lamb Fears show because I asked her to. But other than that, she doesn't really want to do these things. So, I mean, unless George Knapp or George Norrie or, what is his name, Ian Punnett or Whitley Strieber or Rob McConnell, people with big popular shows, I mean, unless they're going to take the initiative and make this a news story in spite of the fact that the two main subjects of the news story don't want to talk about this publicly, that other one being David Jacobs, of course, then what can you do, really? But hopefully this will be remedied with the UFO Magazine article coming out next issue. I think then people will have no choice but to pay attention for all of 5 seconds and then go back to normal. Nothing to see here. Move it along. But at least then it will be a choice. But still, all of that said, it is mysterious, to say the least, that this has been covered on our show, a couple of other podcasts, and a radio show, and has been written about sparsely in the blogosphere, but it still hasn't been picked up on message boards, on ATS specifically. Now, I don't know. I don't know if what they need is to hear it on Coast to Coast for it to be real, or more likely it's what we think, which is that people aren't attracted to reality, and that's why they get into this in the first place, mainly. But in the end, it's probably for the best, because imagine if Emma Woods was the type of person to leap at every interview and, take to the stage and become a darling of conferences. Sooner than later, she would be sucked up by the exopolitical movement, and specifically Greer, who believes all abductions are bullshit because peace, love, blah, blah, blah. Or at least claims he believes that. Really, Greer doesn't believe anything. He's a bullshit artist. Nevertheless, those are just some things that jumped out at me to say on the show here. So, and I should correct one thing. I said Clinton wanted to know the truth about UFOs and JFK. It was specifically Roswell and JFK that he inquired about. So, for those who make distinctions like that, there you go. Anyway, I liked it, Jeff. I did not replace it with a test pattern, and I'm sure the overwhelming majority of our audience is glad for that. So, yay! Yay! Job well done. This special person's getting off the short bus right now.